In the previous video, we've registered two autoloaders. First one which looks within the classes directory, up here, and then the other one which looks within the source directory. The problem we were faced with was that we have the class with the same name in both of the directories. Now, usually I would probably keep all of my files within the same directory. Problem, however, is that if I was to drag this basket from within the classes to the source directory, it would simply override the existing basket.php file, because obviously you cannot have two files with the same name within the same directory. And to solve the problem like this, we can make use of the namespaces. Let's go back to our browser, to PHP documentation, and see what it says about namespaces. What are namespaces? In the broadest definition, namespaces are a way of encapsulating items. This can be seen as an abstract concept in many places. For example, in any operating system, directories serve to group related files and act as namespace for the files within them. As a concrete example, the file foo.txt can exist in both directory home greg and in home other, but two copies of foo.txt cannot coexist in the same directory, which is exactly what I just showed you a second ago. In addition, to access the foo.txt file outside of the home greg directory, we must prepend the directory name to the file name using the directory separator to get home greg and then the name of the file at the end. This simple principle extends to the namespaces in the programming world. And then we have, in the PHP world, namespaces are designed to solve two problems that authors of libraries and applications encounter when creating reusable code elements such as classes or functions. Name collisions between code you create and internal PHP classes function constants or third-party classes functions constants. And this refers to the situation we already encountered in the previous video when we had class with the same name and it was obviously residing in a different directories. We could only use one because autoloader, without using namespaces, would load the first one that it can find within the include path or the whatever we actually searching for a class from within the autoloader. Then we have ability to alias or shorten extra long names designed to alleviate the first problem, improving readability of source code. In the early days, when we started working with classes in PHP, you would be using a structure like this, for instance, where each item separated with the underscore would represent directory within which the final name of the class would reside. These days, we simply use the name and we use namespaces for this purpose. So let's go back to the editor. And I'm going to remove this first autoloader, and I'm also going to remove these classes with the class basket in it. And I'm going to remove these two arguments from this autoloader registration here. And what I'm going to do is open the basket.php within a source directory. And before I declare the namespace for this file, I need to first decide what namespace I want to use for all of the files within my source directory. And I'm going to use the namespace up. So after the open in PHP tag, new line, and we're going to start with the namespace keyword, and after this space, and we start with the app. So any file, every single file that's under the source directory, directly under this directory, will be within the app namespace, meaning that app points to the source directory. So my basket is within the app directory. My collection will also belong to the app namespace. So namespace app. Save it. So basket and collection is within the app namespace. As you can see now, the collection highlight is gone. But for matter, because they are not namespaced yet, now my code, which from within this basket class, does not know what namespace this formatter belongs to. We belong to the namespace app, but which formatter should I use? There isn't a formatter with any namespace declared. So if we create a new directory, actually, because I want to keep my formatters in a separate directory, so I'm going to create a new directory and call it formatter. And within this directory, I'm going to actually drag all of these formatter related files to this formatter directory. And now I'm going to start with this array formatter. the namespace for this one will be, we start with the source directory, which is represented by the app namespace. Then we have the formatter directory. So this is the namespace for this file. Namespace, app, then backslash, which represents directory separator like for namespacing. So app, then we have formatter. This is the namespace for my array formatter. It's within the app namespace and then formatter. So this is the namespace for this file. And the same namespace will be applied to the formatter because they're within the same directory. So app formatter, then JSON formatter, same namespace, and a string formatter, exactly same one. So if we now save it, as you can see, these highlights are now gone. My ID is a little bit confused here with this one, so I'm just going to remove it and try again. Just paste it in, and now it works a little bit better. Okay, so all these files have now their own namespace. Basket and the collection is within the app namespace, which is directly under the source directory. But all of these formatters are within the app formatter namespace, which is basically app represents the source directory and then formatter, obviously, the name of the directory. So that's the namespace for all these formatters. Okay, now one problem, as you can see, now this formatter here is highlighted. So basket doesn't know which formatter should it use. There's no any import. And now by import, I mean any indication as to which file should this type hint here represent. So what I'm going to do in order to make it clear to my basket class which class should it use, I'm going to use the use statement. In other words, we're going to import this class to this file. Use, and then this formatter is within the app namespace, then backslash formatter, and the name of the file is formatter. And now, as you can see, this highlight is gone because it knows exactly which file I'm referring to. Okay, so this formatter is that precise class within the app formatter namespace. So that's how we import in classes to the other classes or other files using this use statement. And obviously, again, remember that whenever you are importing classes, we also use backslash the same way as we declare in the namespaces. Okay, we can close our basket. If we open our collection, do we import anything here? No, these are just simple methods, so that's all fine. Now, obviously, our index.php needs some work because if we go back to the browser, refresh the page, you see we have this problem require one source / then up / collection. Obviously, quite a mess if you ask me. Okay, if we go back, this is happening obviously because we don't know which file this one is, which file this class actually is within, which are these classes and so on. Because we now have them namespace, we need to use these namespaces when we actually calling them. And to call the class with a namespace, we start with a backslash, then the namespace. So it's going to be up, then backslash, and basket. As you can see, now this highlight is gone because it knows exactly which basket I'm after. And now if I had another basket somewhere within the source directory, I could put it in a separate directory. Let's say here, say store, for instance, and then I could have another basket here, .php. And now if I declare the namespace for this as, again, namespace up, then backslash store. Now, if I wanted to use this file specifically, all I would have to do is, let's say, store basket equals new backslash app store basket. And you can see how easy it was to avoid any naming collisions. Now we can have two files with the same name loaded to the same index or any other file. So we can use files with the same names as long as they are in a different directories. They represent different namespace, and we can use them both, obviously associate them with the different variable names. Obviously, we don't need this one here for the store for the time being. So we have this basket within the app namespace. These ones obviously are within the app, then formatter namespace. So we use app formatter namespace and then obviously the name of the file. The same goes for the other formatters that we use in here. So if we now save it, preview everything in the browser, and we still will get the error. And this is because we still haven't resolved the auto-loading. As you can see, we still have source/up / then it's like a mixture of everything really. If we go back to the editor, now what happens here? We need to modify our auto-loader in order to be able to actually load this file, to recognize this up namespace. So to start with, we are going to, first of all, actually, I'm going to rename this argument here. Rather than name, we're going to rename it to class underscore name, or you can use the camel case, just class capital N for name. We're going to start with class name. We're going to override it. First of all, I'm going to strip this first / because when the autoloader is triggered, the fully qualifying name of the class is being passed through as an argument, meaning that we will have the full class name, including the namespace, starting with the /. So first thing we want to do is to remove this / from the left-hand side. So L trim, then we go for the class name and remove any /. We need to use 2 backslashes here in between a single or double quotes, because if we only use one, you can see this is messing up the code, because this / simply escapes this quote mark here. So we need to do 2, and they will effectively represent just a single /. Okay, so we have class name, and now removing this / from the beginning, and then we override this with string replace. What we want to replace within this class name, we want to create the path to the file. And in order to create the path to the file, we need to replace whatever the separator is, and for class, for namespacing, we have / with the directory separator on a given system. So we're going to use, first of all, we're looking for /. Same situation as before, we need to use 2 to get 1. And then we want to replace it with the directory separator, the constant which stores the existing system's directory separator. And then we want to replace it within the class name. So now, if we call up basket, this should return something like up / basket on Mac or Linux, any sort of Unix flavor. On Windows, it will be with the / because Windows uses backslashes for directory separation. Okay, so now all we need to do with this class name is pass it to this require ones, so that it actually goes to the source directory and then finds the file, right? Well, not quite. And not quite because the problem that we have here is that we still have this up at the beginning, and we know that this up represents the source directory. So let's go back to the browser, refresh the page, and you'll see the problem we have. Now we pointed to source, up, and basket, which is obviously not right. We need to get rid of this up and only point to the source. So back to the editor. What we can do here is, rather than having 2 backslashes replacing from the left-hand side, let's just replace / with the up altogether. So this whole part, for instance, from the basket is going to be removed, and we will only be left with this / basket. So we could probably add another / here, but let's see if it's going to work this way. Maybe we don't have to be worried about this /. Refresh the page, and there we go. Everything works fine. And this is because this L trim will trim any of these characters, / and up, meaning that if we remove the first / then up, then we still have 1 / to remove. And because this is part of the string that we are trying to trim, it will trim as many of these characters as it encounters, basically. So it replaces the / up, and then any / after this as well. So that's why this class name here is already just basket. After this line, we only have basket. And obviously, if we had any other namespaces, these would be replaced with the /, like for instance in these calls here to array formatter, JSON, and string formatter. Okay, so this now works just fine. Now, another thing we can do here is to replace these calls, inline calls to the classes, with the use state, import basically these classes to this file. In other words, what we can do is use the use statement and then up / basket and remove all this. As you can see, when we importing classes, then we don't use the / at the beginning. We only use it when we actually use them inline. Okay, the same goes for this array formatter. So let's copy this entire thing, and we're going to do use app formatter, array formatter, and we can remove this full path and only use the class name. Same for JSON formatter, and I'm just going to duplicate this line, this last line, and just replace the name and remove the namespace from the call. So now all these classes are imported here, and I can use them just by using their name. So if we save it, preview it in the browser, everything still works just fine. But now what I can also do is create another string formatter, for instance. I can create a helper directory under the source directory. Say helper, and within this helper I'm going to create another formatter. It's going to be called string formatter. And the namespace for this one is going to be up again, which is pointing to the source directory, then helper. And now from within this string format, I'm going to create a simple method, public function to lower case, and it will take string as argument. And since I'm using PHP 7, I can type hint it as string. And now what I'm going to do, simply return string to lower and pass string through as an argument. We could probably use this function directly from whatever we're going to be calling it, but just to show you the proof of the fact that now with the namespace, we can actually have multiple files with the same name and convert string to lower case. And if we go back to our index.php, let's remove these two calls. We only keep the basket format and string formatter, and let's create a few new lines so you can see things a little bit better. And here now I can call echo, and now rather than instantiating the class and associating the new instance of the class with the variable, I'm just going to do it inline. So I wrap everything, the statement when I'm instantiating the class within the brackets, and then new string formatter. But this one I want the helper one, so up helper string formatter. And on this instance, after the brackets, because these brackets will now contain the instance of this class, otherwise we could associate it with the variable as we did before, obviously, a variable equals and then instantiating the class. But if we want to do it inline, you can wrap it with the set of brackets. And now call the method to lowercase, passing the string, let's say, upper case, and that should give us upper with obviously two p's. And that should give us the same uppercase, but in a lowercase. So if we go back to the browser, refresh the page, and there we go. Now this is converted to lowercase. And we are using two different string formatters here. One is the formatter when we actually converting the items from within the basket class into the string. And this one simply has this to lowercase method, which we call indirectly on the instance of it. And again, we can import it. So let's just import this class using the use statement and remove this full namespace and only use the file name. The only problem, as you can see now, is the naming collision. Now, how does this format method know which string formatter am I referring to? And there is an easy way to resolve this problem, which is by the use of aliases. So when we have two classes with the same name but within a different namespace, and we want to use them both with, if there are more of them, obviously within the same class, then we simply alias them using the s statement, and then we give them some custom name just for the use within this file. And for this one, because it's a helper string formatter, I'm just going to call it helper string formatter. And now it's clear that this string formatter is referring to this string formatter, and this one, well, this one still refers to the same one because we didn't change the name. So we need to change it now using this alias, helper string formatter. So now it is clear which one uses which instance, which class basically, to instantiate itself. So string formatter refers to string formatter, and this second string formatter is now being used as a helper string formatter. We're using this alias here, new helper string formatter, and then we call method on it. So as you can see, this is how you can import your classes, associate aliases with them if they are the same names of the classes to avoid any naming collision. And we can obviously use the same file names, same class names, multiple times within our projects, just associating them with a different namespaces. Now you might be thinking, well, these use statements are pretty much like the require statements that we had before. We still need to include these files here. Well, yes, but if you think about this, we don't have to include any files that we are actually not using within this file directly. String formatter, for instance, uses formatter behind the scenes. It uses this interface, but we don't have to import it at all to this file. We only import the classes that we actually use within the file itself. We don't have to import anything else. We, for instance, didn't have to import this collection either, which basket uses, because behind the scenes that's been autoloaded whenever the basket has requested this collection class. So now we can obviously remove this array and JSON format. As you can see, these are graded out because my IDE knows we don't make use of these classes, so we can remove them, and we only have 3 imports here at the moment. We could also obviously just remove these imports and use inline namespacing, but it is a common approach to use imports and then just class names or aliases in this case as well. But you are free to use it whichever way you want. Obviously, if you prefer inline, then obviously you can keep it inline. Otherwise, you can import it using the use statement within your file. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll have a look at the composer and how we can actually use the autoloader that comes with it.